All right, my friends, welcome back. This is going to be part 78 of my presentation on the flood and Noah's Ark. And we've been discussing the Ice Age for about, I'm looking at with this video here, this is the 9th video that I've done concerning the Ice Age. And so I got several more. I'm not done yet. But we've been looking at the mammoths for several of these videos. And so it's trying to make heads or tails out of some of this. Believe me, not everybody agrees with each other, even creationists. You got Dr. Walt Brown, who does not believe that the mammoths were adapted for cold weather. And then Michael Ord, who believes they were, and that the climate in these areas, and guys, we're not talking about mammoths, all over the world. We're just talking about the general area that I'm talking about, mostly, unless I state any different, is going to be Alaska and Siberia. Those are the two areas that we're looking at. And but Michael Ord believes that right after the flood, that the temperatures up there were not as extreme as they are now, and that he even questions whether or not the mammoths froze as fast as what some other creationists are saying, the instant freeze theory. And so even though that some of the things that they found is quite amazing, and we're going to look at some other things that they found with the food being in some of the mammoths' mouths that were in a frozen state. I mean, the animal didn't even finish chewing the food, and it immediately was killed. And so, but we're going to look at some things further. I hope I'm not confusing anybody. And so we're kind of jumping around here and there, but it's just the information. I'm trying to put it in more of a fluid motion here, so we can, have somewhat wrap our brains somewhat of the information that's out there. But guys, it's I've been all over the place trying to find this stuff, and so some of it's secular information, some of it is creation, and so but even these two creationists, who I highly respect and recommend you guys getting their material, both of them do not agree with each other. And we'll be looking at some more of that stuff as I continue on. Now, I did mention in the past videos about the anal flap. If you'll notice on the screen here, the picture to the right, these are two views that creationists have. One saying no, one saying yes. And the one on the right said yes because of small ears being one, a small tail, and an anal flap. Now, I did do some digging. I went ahead and done some digging because it was bothering me. I had to find out exactly why does an anal flap have anything to do with an animal being adapted for cold weather. What exactly does it do? And so I found some information. If you'll notice that one picture to the right that says yes, small ears, go right below it there, and I've added some more information to this. It's the highlighted yellow area. It says a small tail and flap of the skin over the anus was one of the things that they said that showed that the mammoths were adapted for cold weather. Though, and this right here was the new information that I have found, the African elephant also has a prominent anal flap, and the Asian elephant also has an anal flap. It is also called a genital shield, which protects against getting dirty. This is the anal area, getting dirty, injury, and infection. And so I guess it would also protect the genital areas also, but mainly supposedly this skin helps protect the anus from getting dirty, injury, and infection. Okay, another problem that they have seen is with the mammoths being adapted to cold weather is the trunk. It says here that the average January temperature in northeastern Siberia is about minus 28 degrees below zero, and that's 60 degrees below freezing. During the Ice Age, it was much colder. The long, slender trunk of the mammoth was particularly vulnerable to cold weather. A 6-foot long nose could not survive even one cold night, let alone an 8-month long Siberian winter or a sudden cold snap. For the more slender trunk of a young mammoth, the heat loss would be more deadly, and an elephant usually dies if its trunk is seriously injured. And so, again, this is some of the thoughts that creationists are putting forth. Though Michael Ord states that he is believing that through his research that the areas that the mammoths lived in during the Ice Age was not as cold. They were living in more unglaciated areas is where they would live at. And so near the glaciers, but in unglaciated areas. And so when they were thriving, they didn't have the extreme temperatures that they're stating here. And so, but again, just throwing that out. Now, if you'll notice here also, just to add a little something else on as far as with the temperature, the Berezovka mammoth, Michael Ord stated that the internal organs had rotted away and the stomach was badly decayed when it was found, showing that it may have not been under the extreme temperatures as previously thought. And so, again, more information there to show that, now remember, to get these animals to freeze where their stomach contents would not rot away, these animals are going to have to drop down, if you remember in our previous videos, down to somewhere well below 150 degrees, like 175 degrees. And as Ken Hovind, when he said he called them up, they said it would have to be nearly minus 300 degrees below zero. And so, and then that gave the question, was it possible that there was another mechanism in play here that could actually have came from outer space? And so, but the earlier researchers from Bird's Eye Frozen Food stated that well below 150, at least 175 degrees. And so at that time, they were just saying that it was minus 175 degrees below zero, which is still chilly. Very, 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 very chilly. Okay, now, going on here, when we're talking about the mammoths and how many that were found, it says here, we cannot minimize the frozen mammoth mystery by saying only a few complete mammoths have been recorded or reported, which there hadn't been a whole lot of them that have been found. One good case would be enough. Undoubtedly, hundreds of past discoveries went unreported because many Siberians believed that looking at a mammoth's face brought death or misfortune. Fear of being forced by scientists to dig a mammoth out of frozen ground suppressed other discoveries. Also, Siberia and Alaska are sparsely populated and relatively unexplored. Flowing rivers are the primary excavators. So man has seen only a tiny sample of what is buried. Siberian geologists report that work at the gold mines uncovers frozen corpses every year. But because the arrival of scientists can delay and complicate the mining, most frozen mammoths are lost to science. Widespread freezing and rapid burial are also inferred when commercial-grade ivory is found. Ivory tusk, unless frozen and protected from the weather, dry out, lose their animal matter and elasticity, crumble, crack, and become useless for carving. Between about 1750 and 1917, trade in mammoth ivory prospered over a wide geographical region, yielding an estimated 96,000 mammoth tusks. The extent and speed of freezing and burial was probably greater than most people have imagined. Now, again, Michael Ord, for the most part, is not agreeing here with what Dr. Brown is stating in his book in the beginning. And one of the arguments that he has is that it's because of the lack of whole woolly mammoths is one of the reasons against there being rapid freezing, quick freeze, and the quick freeze and the burial of the mammoths. He states that that most of them are found decayed, and the ones that they have found in the ground that they thought were whole mammoths, whenever they clear away the muck and the overburden that's around the mammoth, most of the mammoth is rotted away. Most of it has rotted away, and it's just not much of it, is there. And so, except for just the tusk. So he states that the lack of mammoths, not the lack of mammoths being found in a whole frozen state, is one of the reasons that he's saying that the mammoths probably didn't freeze as quick as what some of the other creationists are saying. But there's been some really wild discoveries that have been found, and one of them is here. If you'll notice, the fish frozen in underground ice. The fish frozen in underground ice. It says, two strange but admittedly secondary reports. There's going to be another one that I'm going to show you right after this one here. May relate to the frozen mammoth problem. Each is so surprising that one might dismiss it as a mistake or hoax. Just as with any single report of a frozen mammoth, however, because both reports are so similar yet originated from such different sources, it is probably best to reserve judgment. Each report was accepted as credible and published by an eminent scientific authority. Each involved the sudden freezing of a river in apparent defiance of the way bodies of water freeze. Each contained frozen animals in transparent ice, yet natural ice is rarely transparent. Each discovery was in a cold, remote part of the world. One was in the heart of Siberia's frozen mammoth country. The brief reports will be given exactly as they were written and translated. The first was published by a former Soviet Academy of Sciences, Alexander, and whatever his name is there, I don't want to mess it up, winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1970, recalled this report as best he could remember it. In the first paragraph of his preface to the Gulag Archipelago, unfortunately, whatever his last name, I'm going to say Solzhenitsyn, did not give the report's date. So I began a difficult search. The report was finally found in Moscow's Lenin State Library. Y.N. Popov, author of this report, was discussing the scientific importance of finding mammals frozen in Siberia. He then described some frozen fish, and this is what he says. There are some cases of finds of not only dead mammals, but also fishes, unfortunately lost for science in 1942 during road construction in that area there. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that river valley, the Kolyma Basin. An explosion opened a subterranean lens of transparent ice encasing frozen specimens of some big fishes. Apparently, the explosion opened an ancient river channel with representatives of the ancient, the ichthyological fauna, which is fish. The superintendent of construction reported the fishes to be of amazing freshness, and the chunks of meat thrown out by the explosion were eaten by those present. And so, again, this is what they found, showing that I tell you what, that would have to freeze immediately for that to happen. All right, going on to the second report. The second report comes from M. Huck, a missionary traveler in Tibet in 1846. Sir Charles Lyell, often called the father of geology, also quoted this same story in the 11th edition of his Principles of Geology. After many of Huck's party had frozen to death, survivors pitched their tents on the banks of the, whatever that is, Morori Osu, which lower down becomes the famous Blue River. Huck reported, and this is what he stated: at the moment of crossing that river, a singular spectacle presented itself. While yet in our encampment, we had observed at a distance some black, shapeless objects ranged in file across the great river. No change, either in form or distinctness, was apparent as we advanced, nor was it till they were quite close that we recognized in them a troop of wild oxen. There were more than 50 of them encrusted in the ice. No doubt they had tried to swim across at the moment of freezing and had been unable to disengage themselves. Their beautiful heads, surmounted by huge horns, were still above the surface, but their bodies were held fast in the ice, which was so transparent that the position of the imprudent beast was easily distinguishable. They looked as if still swimming, but the eagles and ravens had pecked out their eyes. Any explanation for these, and then that's the end of what he stated, and it goes on with the information. Any explanation for these strange discoveries must recognize that streams freeze from the top down. The ice form floats and then insulates the warmer liquid water below. The thicker the ice grows, the harder it is for the liquid's heat to pass up through the ice layer into the cold air. Freezing a stream fast enough to trap more than 50 upright oxen in the act of swimming across seems impossible, especially because a stream's velocity carries considerably across its width. Therefore, different parts of the stream should freeze over many days or hours. Freezing a river so fast that large fish are frozen, edible, and underground defiles belief. However, the similarities with frozen mammoths are so great that these reports may be related. And so, guys, I tell you what, I'm sitting here looking at my slides. I was really hoping to go over a bit more, but that's okay. We'll pick this up again. And again, this is just some really fascinating information. And so I just want to give you as much as I've been able to find. And believe me, I'm still just scratching the surface, guys. There's just so much for both sides, really. There really is enough for both sides. But it is a mystery, guys. It really is a mystery on how creationists and then evolutionists, I think more sense of what has happened is being made from the creationist, because they're not looking at it in a uniformitarian way. That is right there is the wrench or the stumbling block for these evolutionists. Is they gotta get away from that uniformitarian thinking. When they add in that uniformitarian thinking, it makes this even more confusing. And so, as Michael Ort states in his book, Frozen in Time. But at any rate, we'll pick this up next time, guys. I love you. I hope the Lord bless you real good, and we'll discuss this another day. Bye-bye.